The first alert came from a deep space listening station orbiting the dead moon of Enkoval. It was a routine sweep, automated, quiet, and so predictable that the two technicians assigned to it were mid-nap when the alarm blared to life. Within moments, lights flashed across the consoles, and a name began cycling through the Imperial Threat Detection System. Unidentified vessel. Unknown origin. Inbound through collapsed corridor Zeta 4. Collapsed corridor. That phrase alone should have been impossible. Zeta 4 was a dead warp lane, crushed in on itself during the Hyperlight Wars over 3,000 cycles ago. It had swallowed entire fleets and never reopened. Navigation beacons refused to activate in its space, and no probes had ever returned. The Empire had declared it off-limits, and no one questioned it, until now. The technicians scrambled to verify the readings, convinced it was a glitch, but the ship was real. It emerged not in pieces, not damaged or drifting, but fully intact, running silent, and steadily approaching one of the Empire's most secure zones. Before protocol could catch up, the Imperial Security Network snapped to attention. Fleet Command demanded identification. The mystery ship answered within seconds. It didn't transmit a code, a banner, or an encryption key. It transmitted music, soft, echoing jazz. Then came a voice, relaxed, amused, and unmistakably human. This is the exploration vessel Dauntless Horizon, representing the Terran Union. Sorry for the surprise drop-in. Our coordinates were a little off. We'll just be here a minute. Panic spread like wildfire across the command network. Humans? The Terran Union was barely 100 years into galactic contact. Their ships were registered only in fringe systems, mostly cargo haulers and science vessels. They didn't have clearance for warp-tier routes, and they definitely didn't have the technology to traverse a collapsed corridor. But here they were, bold as anything, cruising through forbidden space as if taking a scenic detour. By the time the first interceptor ships launched, Dauntless Horizon had already moved deeper into restricted zones, scanning ancient satellites and broadcasting more cheerful audio logs. There was no fear in their voice, no attempt at evasion, and no apparent realization of how much trouble they were in. The Empire's admirals assembled an emergency council, poring over the telemetry. The ship's engine signature made no sense. Its hull geometry defied their models. Its course had clipped through a sector known to cause drive decay in even the most advanced vessels. Nothing about it fit. It shouldn't be possible, one admiral muttered. Yet here it is, another said, staring at the screen. The room fell into tense silence as the realization settled in. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't luck. Someone on Earth had figured out something the rest of the galaxy had given up on long ago, and they had sent it boldly into the Empire's backyard. The last official report on humanity had been filed 93 cycles ago, buried deep within the Empire's Bureau of Emerging Species. It listed Earth as non-threatening, technologically immature, and culturally fragmented. Humans were curious and creative, yes, but without access to real warp technology, they were destined to remain local explorers at best. No one had updated the file since. Now that file was being dragged to every war table, every intelligence hub, and every classified chamber within the Empire's command structure. The phrase non-threatening was being quietly deleted. Fleet Admiral Versick, a reptilian veteran of 2 border wars and an architect of imperial containment policy, stared at the flickering hologram of the Dauntless Horizon with narrowed eyes. The vessel's silhouette was nothing like any galactic design, brutally angled, armored unevenly, and pulsing with unfamiliar energy signatures. To his trained senses, it looked like a weapon disguised as a mining barge. "How did we miss this?" he growled. No one answered. Across the hall, Science Minister Yulin nervously paged through ancient warp theory texts, trying to match the energy spikes detected from the collapsed corridor. Nothing lined up. The ship had passed through warped space without suffering atomic shear, time dilation, or spatial fracture. The last species that attempted such a thing had been lost forever. But humans, They'd done it and were now joyriding in secure space, apparently sightseeing. A meeting of the Imperial Strategic Thinkers Guild was called that same evening. Generals, scholars, and predictive AI constructs debated the implications. Most agreed it had to be a one-time fluke, maybe a rogue human experiment, maybe a prototype stolen from an older species. Surely it couldn't be reproducible. But one AI, designated Pattern Seeker 19, calmly projected a different outcome. If a civilization discovers a stable method of collapsed lane traversal, it said, and they are driven by exploration rather than conquest, the likelihood of unpredictable encounters increases by 94%. Translation: humans were just getting started. Meanwhile, the dauntless horizon continued broadcasting harmlessly. Sensor scans, friendly messages, and more strange music from Earth. It showed no signs of aggression. It didn't even power its defense grid when approached by scouts. The crew waved through their windows. They even invited one patrol ship to come aboard for drinks. None of this helped the Empire's growing anxiety. The real problem wasn't that humans had entered forbidden space. It was that they hadn't tried to hide it. They weren't testing the Empire. They didn't seem to care whose backyard they were in. They were just exploring for fun. They act like the rules don't apply to them, said one commander, his voice tight with disbelief. No, corrected Admiral Versick. They act like they don't even know there were rules to begin with. And that, more than anything, made them dangerous. The Imperial recon vessel Veyron's Edge was the first to approach dauntless horizon within visual range. Its captain, Loruntai, was handpicked for composure under pressure. She had negotiated peace during border skirmishes and once talked down a rampaging war hulk, but nothing in her decorated career had prepared her for what she saw. Dauntless Horizon didn't look like it belonged in space. The hull was thick, layered, and scarred with what appeared to be intentional abrasions. It had mismatched plating, some shining silver, some dull gray, and one section that looked like it had been carved from an asteroid. The engines were oversized and oddly mounted, with cooling systems that vented plasma in irregular bursts. The silhouette shifted with each rotation, like it was always slightly off balance, but never quite unstable. Tai ran multiple scans. Each result brought more confusion. The outer armor was laced with alloys that hadn't been classified before, likely composite materials fused through brute thermal forging, not precision engineering. The interior had redundant systems stacked 3 layers deep, all functioning independently. One power core alone could have sustained a light cruiser. Dauntless Horizon had 3. There were no elegant design lines, no aesthetic shaping, no traditional symmetry. The ship looked like it had been built by mad geniuses working without a blueprint and never once worrying about what other species might think. And it worked. Tai's engineer, a meticulous Valari named Senthu, ran diagnostics on the drive system and turned pale. "They're using a variable phase compression coil," he whispered, "on an unshielded core. That shouldn't be stable at this range." "But it is," Tai replied, staring at the slow, methodical rotation of the vessel. It wasn't just functioning, it was thriving. The humans welcomed the approach. A woman identifying herself as Chief Engineer Riley Hayes sent over schematics with smiling emojis and an enthusiastic invitation to compare notes. She even included a short video explaining how the ship had survived a gravity well tumble by rotating its fuel pods into a secondary dampening ring. It was narrated over jazz music. Senthu watched the video twice, muttering under his breath. "They're not engineers, they're alchemists." Back at Imperial Command, the images from Tai's recon pass sent analysts into disarray. Dozens of species had tried building super-resilient ships, but none had succeeded. Every attempt had failed under its own complexity or become economically impossible. Humans had done it and added cupholders. "This vessel wasn't designed to look impressive," said Minister Yulin during a closed review session. "It was designed to survive the worst the universe can throw at it, and based on its construction, they fully expected the worst." A silence followed. Finally, Admiral Versick said what everyone else was thinking. They didn't build a ship to explore the galaxy. He leaned forward, eyes grim. They built a ship to punch through it. When the diplomatic envoy arrived, the humans were already docked on a derelict Imperial observation ring near the edge of the Forbidden Zone. They hadn't asked for permission. They hadn't even announced it. They simply saw an abandoned structure and decided it looked cool. Ambassador Veltrin of the Imperial Council arrived aboard the sleek vessel Graceful Accord, his expression carefully neutral. He was accompanied by 2 honor guards and a data scribe to record every word, tone, and microgesture. Human behavior was unpredictable, and every detail mattered. What he found was baffling. The humans had set a lounge area in the observation deck, complete with fold-out chairs, glowing mugs of some hot liquid, and a board game Veltrin couldn't identify. They welcomed him with genuine smiles, unarmed and unguarded. One of them offered cookies. The ambassador declined. Captain Mira Chen extended a hand. "Pleasure to meet you, sir. Sorry if we caused a stir. We weren't exactly aiming for this quadrant." Veltrin kept his voice smooth. "Your arrival has been noted. The Empire would like to understand how your vessel navigated a collapsed war corridor." Chen shrugged, taking a sip from her mug. "We ran simulations, took some risks. Honestly, we didn't think it would work the first time. But hey, now we know." "You experimented." "Yeah, you'd be amazed what a few stubborn engineers and some recycled reactor cores can accomplish. We kind of specialize in impossible." Veltrin blinked slowly. The human was either bluffing or completely sincere. He wasn't sure which was worse. Engineer Hayes wandered over, wiping grease from her hands. "We were mostly just curious. There's a bunch of stuff in dead space nobody ever explores. Figured, why not see what's out there?" Veltrin tried to reassert control. "You violated multiple treaties, entered sovereign space, and exposed yourselves to dangers no known civilization can survive." Chen smiled. "We get that a lot." There was no fear in their eyes, no signs of tension or guilt. They acted like explorers stopping by for snacks. Not invaders, not spies, just people on an adventure. Veltrin's scribe noted every detail, but the ambassador already knew this wasn't an act. These humans were genuinely unbothered by the risks they'd taken, not because they didn't understand the stakes, but because they had accepted the cost before launching. "You were prepared to die," Veltrin said quietly. Captain Chen looked out the window at the stars. "Of course," she said. "That's how Discovery works." Later, as the envoy returned to the Empire's command ship, Veltrin sat in silence. He wasn't sure if he'd just met the most reckless species in the galaxy or the most fearless. Maybe both. And either way, the balance of power had just shifted. Inside the glass fortress of High Command on Corvallis Prime, the Empire's most powerful leaders met behind sealed doors. The council chamber, carved from obsidian and wrapped in sensor-proof shielding, had hosted war declarations, peace treaties, and planetary verdicts. But this time, the room buzzed with something unfamiliar. Unease. Holo projections of the dauntless horizon floated above the central table, rotating slowly. Engine schematics, hull analysis, energy signatures, and worst of all, a live feed showing the human crew laughing over breakfast, completely unaware or uncaring of the chaos they had caused. "This ship is not a threat," stated Lord Admiral Versick. "It is a statement, one we do not understand." Minister Yulin tapped her datapad rapidly. "Our analysts confirmed their drive violates 3 known limits of subspace stability. It should have torn itself apart on entry." "It didn't," another voice muttered. "And they aren't flaunting it," added a science advisor. "They just exist." A pause followed. Someone coughed. High Chancellor Verex, the oldest among them, stood slowly. His voice, usually calm and calculated, now carried a tremor. "We have built our dominance on predictability. Our fleet routes, warp corridors, trade lanes, all mapped and secured. We understood every player on the board." He turned, staring at the live feed. A human in an oil-stained uniform was juggling fruit for the entertainment of a crewmate. Then the humans entered the game, Virex continued, and flipped the board. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some still clung to the belief that it was all a trick. Others whispered that Earth had made a secret alliance with a long-dead hyper-civilization, but most knew the truth deep down. Humanity had done this alone. The room erupted into debate. One admiral demanded immediate lockdown of all warp gates. Another called for the isolation of Earth. A third warned that overt hostility might provoke retaliation from a species that clearly didn't fear death. "We don't even know how many ships they have," someone shouted. "What if this isn't their best?" Silence fell. The question hung there, heavy and terrifying. If Dauntless Horizon was just a scout, what else was coming? Pattern Seeker 19, the Empire's most advanced analytical AI, broke the silence with a calm, mechanical voice. Probability matrix updated. Containment no longer viable. Recommend adaptation over confrontation. "What do you mean adaptation?" growled Admiral Versick. The AI rotated the ship's image and highlighted its internal modular design. Humans are not building fleets. They are building platforms. Configurable, upgradable, and fast. Their technology evolves mid-flight. Yulin stared, realizing the implication. They don't follow doctrine. They follow instinct. "Worse," said Virex. "They follow curiosity." That, above all, terrified the Empire. Not weapons, not fleets, but the idea that humans would not stop, that they would keep pushing, exploring, and testing limits, no matter who stood in their way. And there was no protocol for that. The Empire's wargame division was housed deep within the moon fortress of Delark, a sealed complex filled with neural link chairs, combat AIs, and hyper-real predictive engines. It was here that every possible military scenario had been simulated: rebellions, invasions, civil collapses, and alien incursions. The system was never wrong. Until now. General Ektar, a veteran strategist known for defeating 2 insurgent fleets with only decoy drones and a supply line hack, sat quietly as the simulation began. On the screen, Dauntless Horizon entered the Empire's core system alone. No escort, no weapons active. Scenario parameters were simple: intercept and neutralize. Wave 1, standard interceptors. The human ship outmaneuvered them using what the AI labeled reckless evasion paths that should have torn its hull apart. It didn't. Wave 2, precision strikes. The human crew activated a shielding system that deflected the blasts by venting directional plasma, an unorthodox method that blinded the Imperial systems. Wave 3, full fleet assault. Dauntless Horizon vanished. Literally. It reappeared behind the fleet, dropped a non-lethal EMP that disabled communications, and then painted the fleet command vessel with a laser tag system usually used for war games. Then it broadcast a single message: "Boo." The room fell silent. "That can't be right," one officer muttered. "Run it again." They ran it 10 more times, changed tactics, increased ships, used scorched earth policies. Nothing worked. In one simulation, the humans faked a reactor meltdown so convincingly the entire Imperial formation retreated to avoid contamination. In another, they played dead, then launched a boarding team dressed in vacuum-sealed novelty suits. Every simulation ended with one conclusion: the Empire could not stop them. It wasn't superior firepower. It wasn't even faster technology. It was unpredictability. Humans didn't follow patterns. They adapted instantly. They weaponized absurdity. They turned engineering failures into battlefield tricks. And worst of all, they laughed while doing it. "These aren't soldiers," one AI remarked. "They are chaotic explorers with zero regard for statistical norms." General Ektar stood slowly, eyes locked on the frozen image of the human ship hovering near a disabled dreadnought. "Cancel further simulations," he said quietly. "But they don't work, and they won't, Because the humans don't play by the same rules, and neither does that ship. Back on Dauntless Horizon, the crew had no idea their presence had just broken the Empire's most trusted predictive models. Chief Engineer Hayes was working on upgrading the coffee synthesizer. Captain Chen was trying to teach an alien scout how to play chess. The navigator was mapping nebula based on cool shapes. No military formation could anticipate that kind of thinking. No empire built on rigidity could contain it. Because humans didn't just explore. They improvised, and there was no simulation in the galaxy that could prepare for what came next. The Empire's blackout couldn't hold. Within cycles, news of the human ship spread beyond imperial borders. First came the whispers from fringe traders who had picked up the strange signal on unsecured bands. Then came the smuggler clans, intrigued by stories of a ship that moved like it was dancing drunk and shrugged off plasma hits like weather. And then came the neighbors. The Union of Hollow Suns, a stoic alliance of science worlds, sent probes to verify the claims. Their own ships had once failed catastrophically attempting to navigate collapsed war corridors. When the humans emerged from one without damage, playing music and requesting directions, they immediately requested an exchange of knowledge. The Creel hives, known for their warrior caste and disdain for non-hive species, initially dismissed the reports as propaganda. But when a scout ship encountered Dauntless Horizon by accident, tried to intimidate it, and ended up being pulled into a gravity slingshot maneuver so clever that their own commander applauded the tactic, they sent a delegation with formal respect markers. Even the Sea Therex enclaves, an ancient species that hadn't updated their diplomacy matrix in 1,000 years, opened communication. Their message was brief. We wish to understand the minds that built that ship. Within standard days, a dozen minor factions were asking for tours of Dauntless Horizon. They weren't just curious about the humans. They were fascinated. Who were these creatures that cobbled together hyperdrives from spare parts, built ships with redundant coffee stations, and broke every law of design while somehow making it work? On board, Captain Chen and her crew were caught off guard. Word getting? Invitations, she blinked. Engineer Hayes scrolled through the incoming messages. Yep. Offers to collaborate. Trade tech. Share star maps. One of them wants to give us a moon. A whole moon. They said it's decorative. Instead of reacting with suspicion, the humans responded with the only thing they knew: enthusiasm. They cleaned up the observation deck, brewed a fresh pot of what they insisted was the best coffee in the galaxy, and prepared slideshows explaining their propulsion tests. To them, this was fun. To the Empire, it was a disaster. Minister Yulin watched in horror as the human ship, once a classified anomaly, became a symbol of unity among species that had barely tolerated each other before. Alliances were being formed. Ideas were being exchanged, all without the Empire's oversight. They're not just spreading influence, she whispered to Chancellor Virex. They're spreading possibility. And the terrifying truth settled in. For thousands of cycles, the Empire had ruled through control, certainty, and fear. But the humans weren't afraid. And now, neither were others. All because of a ship that wasn't supposed to exist. On the central broadcast hub of Sector 9, a signal went out. It wasn't encrypted. It didn't carry a warning or demand. It was a live transmission from the bridge of Dauntless Horizon, and it opened with music, something upbeat, bouncing, human. Then the camera panned to Captain Mira Chen, smiling warmly. "Hello, Galaxy," she said. "We're the crew of the Dauntless Horizon. We didn't mean to cause a stir. We just wanted to see what was out here." The message wasn't strategic. It wasn't filtered through layers of diplomacy or approved by bureaucrats. It was honest, human, and because of that, it spread like wildfire. By the end of the next cycle, it had been viewed in over 90 star systems. By the end of the week, it had started a movement. Independent explorers began modifying their ships, inspired by the human design. Former rivals opened communication channels to collaborate. Fringe engineers dug up old failed projects and asked, "What if we just tried it again, but louder?" Entire civilizations that had grown cautious under the Empire's grip began to remember what wonder felt like. The Empire scrambled to respond. Chancellor Virex ordered a containment message. It was ignored. Admiral Versik proposed seizing the ship. His own fleet commanders hesitated. None wanted to risk becoming the first to fail publicly against the humans. Even Pattern Seeker 19 gave its first uncertain answer in decades. Recommendation: to not engage. Observe. Learn. Back on Dauntless Horizon, life continued without much ceremony. The crew patched a coolant leak, hosted another chess night, and argued over what desert Earth should introduce to the Galactic Commons. They had no great agenda, but they had become a symbol. In a quiet moment, Captain Chen stood alone in the observation dome, watching the stars shift outside. The ship hummed around her, alive with the work of engineers, explorers, and dreamers. Not warriors, not conquerors, just humans. "We weren't supposed to have ships like this," she whispered. But they did. And in doing so, they had changed everything. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the smartest, but because they dared to try. Out of the depths of space, where the Empire's maps ran dry, new paths were forming. Not drawn by ruling councils, but by wandering minds. Not guarded by fleets, but opened by questions. What if we could go farther? What if we built it anyway? What if the impossible wasn't? Dauntless Horizon turned slowly toward an uncharted cluster of nebula, bright, unstable, and filled with danger and wonder. The ship accelerated. Behind it, the galaxy held its breath. Ahead of it, the future waited. And somewhere, buried deep in an Imperial report, the final classified note was logged. Humanity does not follow rules. They make new ones.